All right, welcome to Touring History, the podcast where we discover that every day in history was basically someone's, well, this escalated quickly, moment. I'm Lane.
And I'm an escalator named Dave. And before we dive into today's collection of presidential speeches, space firsts, and corporate empires, we need to thank Randy's Donuts. That's
We
right.
do. Thank you, Randy's.
Thank you, Randy's. You know, that iconic giant donut sign in Inglewood has been a landmark since 1952.
And it survived everything we're about to talk about today: political upheavals, cultural revolutions, and even the birth of Ford Motor Company.
Ooh.
Um, which feels weirdly connected since both involve American innovation and slightly questionable decision making.
Yeah. I mean, that's one powerful donut. I
That's a big
mean,
donut, man. That's
that
a
is
big donut.
major league dough up there. And when you're processing the fact that we live in a timeline where ballet dancers defect during the Cold War and presidential campaigns launch via escalator, well, you know who we're talking about, which we absolutely are today, you need the comfort of knowing that some things endure. That's right, like that 32-foot donut sign that's probably visible from the International Space Station.
Speaking,
Houston, we have a problem.
we're out of donuts.
That's right.
Please send donuts. Randy's donuts.
Yeah, to be specific.
They're out of this world, Dave. They're out of this world.
Oh, I love it.
Speaking of things that endure, it's June 16th, which means we have literary giants, golf legends, and oh no, Dave's going to have opinions about the Monterey Pop Festival, isn't he?
Well, I actually only have opinions about giants. Now, let me talk to you about a green giant I heard about. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm absolutely going to have opinions. Oh, I'm going to have opinions about the Monterey Pop Festival. But first, we need to talk about how this day gave us both profound political speeches and the most chaotic musical festival of the 1960s. And I'm not talking about Woodstock. I am, actually. Starting with...
Birthdays. As
Yay!
always, we're starting with our birthdays.
Yeah, yeah,
Joyce Carol
I get
Oates.
it.
She turns 87 today. And
Oh!
I just want to point out that she's written approximately 847 books, which means she's probably been writing continuously since 1952.
I guess that means she's really feeling her oats. Oh!
Oh,
That's not
yeah.
mathematically possible. But knowing Joyce Carol Oates, she probably figured out how to write in her sleep. I sure do. Also
Yeah.
celebrating Phil Mickelson at 55, the shock.
Mm.
John
Double
Cho at
nickel.
John Cho at 53, and this is where it gets interesting, folks. Tupac Shakur would have been 54. That
That is
rhymes.
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And Justin Jefferson, the NFL receiver, turns 26. So we have a literary powerhouse, a golf legend, a beloved character actor, a hip hop icon who died too young, and a current sports star. That's like the full spectrum of American achievement right there.
And since I'm on the spectrum, do you know what's fascinating? Joyce Carol Oates has been writing professionally longer than some of these other people have been alive. That's right, she started publishing in the early 60s, which means she's witnessed literally everything we're about to discuss as it happened. She's like her own private time capsule.
She is. Meanwhile, Justin Jefferson was born in 1999, which means the internet has existed for his entire life. Different worlds, same birthday.
Wow.
Speaking of different worlds, Dave,
Yes?
let's talk about Abraham Lincoln's house metaphors, shall we?
I didn't know there were such things, but go ahead. I'm all ears and all
Well,
beard.
June 16th, 1858, Abraham Lincoln delivers his "A House Divided Against Itself Cannot Stand" speech in Springfield, Illinois, and basically predicts the Civil War 3 years early.
Yeah, boy, he was prescient. This is where you're fascinating with political foreshadowing. That's that word again. This is where your fascination. He's losing it. Clean up on mic 3. This is where your fascination with political foreshadowing really kicks in, doesn't it?
Yeah, Dave. Look, Lincoln literally said, "I believe this government cannot endure permanently, half slave and half free." Not, "I hope we can work this out through compromise, but this is going to be, but this is going to explode." And everybody's like, "Oh, Abraham, you're being so dramatic."
Yeah. Explode was an understatement. It was kind of a weird war to begin with because people thought it was just going to be this quickie thing and theater. I mean, they'd roll out in their carriages to see the fighting and say, "Oh, this is great." And then when they saw heads being blown apart, like, "Oh, maybe we should go back home." Yeah, this is well, spoiler alert. It certainly did explode, and 600,000 people died. So it was no picnic. Sometimes the dramatic prediction is just, well, accurate.
Yeah, what gets me is that this speech was considered politically risky at the time. His advisors are like, maybe don't say the quiet part out loud about inevitable conflict. But Lincoln was like, no, actually, let's address reality.
Yeah. Can you imagine that conversation? Listen, Abe, we've all gotten together and we think it's a bad idea what you're about to do because, it's going to ruin our chances as well. So why
This
don't you put a cork in it, huh?
this
Oh,
is going to really
oh.
make those plantation owners
Uh,
a little
you know,
upset with us.
to piss them off is what it's going to do, Abe. Come on.
Yeah.
Well, to 1903, something completely different. Ford Motor Company was incorporated. That's right, in Detroit, with $28,000 in initial capital, which, adjusted for inflation, is about 800,000 today. So basically, just a modest startup budget to revolutionize human transportation.
That reminds me of a story,
I
Dave.
bet, Lane.
My great great uncle supposedly had the chance to invest in Ford's company, but
Oh,
decided that horseless carriages were a fad and put his money into a buggy whip factory instead.
oh, wow. Yeah, I bet he hid under the bed for a couple of years, huh? That's the most perfectly American family tragedy I've ever heard. You got some weird relatives. You're always
I
talking
know.
about your great grandfather, your great grandmother. The Aunt Mamie went up in a balloon and never came back.
You know Aunt Mamie?
Oh, well, I did, but all I saw was her hand waving down from me. That's the most perfect American family tragedy I've ever heard. Although, to be fair, in 1903, most people probably thought cars were a rich man's toy. I mean, didn't they used to say to each other, or when they'd pass some stinky car, well, get a horse, Jim.
Probably. They probably did. Henry Ford figured out that if you could mass produce cars, regular people could afford them. That's the key. Can
Yeah.
everybody afford it? Revolutionary concept. Make more stuff, charge less money, sell to everyone instead of just the rich people.
Well, that and the $5 workday, which actually doubled what people are making back then. And he said, if I pay them more, they'll be able to afford my product. And people thought he was nuts, but he was right. And this also marks the beginning of automotive advertising, one of my favorite things besides donut.
Absolutely.
That's right, besides donut advertising, Lane, which would eventually convince Americans that we need a different car for every possible life situation, which includes hearses, unfortunately. Go ahead.
Yes. Moving on to 1961, Rudolf Nureyev defects from the Soviet Union while in Paris. And this wasn't some quiet diplomatic defection. This was straight up spy movie drama.
That's right. I mean, they all waited till they were out of the country to do it, for obvious reasons. But, where to do it with style? Paris. Oh, here we go. Lane's got opinions about Cold War ballet politics. I hear
Well, the KGB was literally trying to force him onto a plane back to Moscow, and
you.
Nureyev ran to French police and asked them for asylum at an airport in front of everyone. Can you imagine being such a good dancer that it becomes a matter of international incident when you want to switch teams?
Yeah, but little known fact, he started to yell at them in Russian, and they're like, "We don't understand you, Mr. Ballet Man. What do you want? The restroom is down the hall." Oh, you want to defect? Why didn't you say so in the first place? This is peak Cold War absurdity, right? The Soviets are like, we cannot allow this ballet dancer to experience Western freedom. He might tell people that art doesn't have to serve the state. Boris.
Yeah. And Nureyev went on to completely revolutionize ballet in the West. So the Soviets basically created their own worst case scenario by trying to prevent it.
Yeah, take that, Natasha. Huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Now on to 1963, another Russian, Valentina Tereshkova, or rather Soviet, becomes the first woman in space aboard Vostok 6. And this is where the Soviet space program gets genuinely impressive, even
Right?
though they probably forced her into the capsule. No, I don't want to go. Get in there.
Yeah, the Americans at this point are still trying to figure out how to keep astronauts alive for more than a few hours, and the Soviets are like, "Let's send a woman to orbit Earth 48 times over 3 days."
Yeah, we at home are still trying to put another Albert up there. All right, boys, let's get Albert 7 in there. That monkey's got to do something. Smells like a zoo in here anyway. We got to clean the place up. Although, what's fascinating is that this was partly propaganda. The Soviets wanted to prove that communism was so advanced that even their women could go to space. But also, Tereshkova was genuinely qualified. She was one smart Soviet chick. She was a textile worker and an amateur parachutist, along with an astronaut or cosmonaut, sorry.
It's quite a CV.
Yes.
And it would be 20 years before another woman went to space. So the Soviets accidentally set a record that stood for 2 decades because everyone else was apparently like, well, that's enough women in space for a while.
That's right, bye. Well, in 1967, the Monterey Pop Festival opens, featuring Hendrix, Joplin, The Who, and basically everyone who would define rock music for the next decade.
And this is where Dave's music history obsession really takes over, isn't it, Dave?
Yes, it is, Lane. Look, this festival basically invented the modern music festival. Before Monterey Pop, you had concerts. After Monterey Pop, you had experiences.
Mm.
Concerts, experiences. Yes, this is where Jimi Hendrix lit his guitar on fire. Nice experience. And the Who destroyed their instruments as performance art. Again, experience.
Also, this was 1967, which means all of this happened during the Summer of Love while the Vietnam War was escalating. So people were literally dancing to revolutionary music while the country was falling apart. Very American.
Yes, they weren't having an experience in Saigon. And the whole thing was filmed. That's right, for posterity. So we have this time capsule of what American counterculture looked like at its peak. It's beautiful and chaotic and kind of heartbreaking when you know what happens next.
Speaking of what happens next, let's jump ahead to 1976. Well, actually, this one's tricky. Tom
Yeah,
Lantos,
right.
who would become a US congressman, was released from a Nazi concentration camp, but that would have been in 1945, not 1976.
Whoa, you've really thrown me for one this time, Lane. Right. This seems like a data mix up. Can't compute. Antos survived the Holocaust as a teenager and later became the only Holocaust survivor to serve in Congress. But his liberation happened decades before 1976. Are you following us?
One of these AI writers is getting fired. I'm telling
That's
you that
right,
right now.
because my
But
head's about to explode.
what's remarkable about Lantos is that he survived one of humanity's worst moments and then dedicated his life to preventing it from happening again. That's the kind of personal history that puts everything else in perspective.
Yeah, I think we got it right at the end. But anyway, actually, 1989 brings us to Soweto, where
And it
youth.
didn't happen in 1989, it happened in 1924.
That's right. During the Great Depression.
Oh,
Wait a
this
minute.
is wrong too.
That was the
This is
30.
wrong. You finish reading your line, you'll find out it's wrong.
1989 brings us to Soweto, where youth protested apartheid education policies and police opened fire on students. Though the major Soweto uprising was actually in 1976. That's
Right.
right. Today's date is all about confusion, ladies and gentlemen.
Right. The famous Soweto uprising, where students protested being forced to learn in Afrikaans, happened in June 16th, 1976. It's one of those dates that changed everything. Hundreds of students killed for demanding education in their own language.
So there will be a test at the end of this episode in Spanish. This is where institutional racism meets generational courage. These were teenagers who were former adults who said, I'm kidding about that. We're not accepting this anymore and paid for it with their lives. But they also helped bring down apartheid. I shouldn't joke about this, but we're on a roll here.
Tragedy plus time.
Yes.
Tragedy plus time. And it took until the 1990s for the world to fully address this through sanctions and pressure. Sometimes the right side of history moves painfully slowly.
Yes, and the left side just goes like a rocket.
Well, it's time to talk about our value driven sponsor,
Yay!
Randy's
Donuts!
Donuts. They've been a constant through all the chaos we've been discussing. I've
Oh,
had
let's
three
discuss.
so far
Yes,
during this
I love
podcast.
discussing Randy's Donuts. You know what I love about this? While we're talking about political upheavals and social revolutions, there's something reassuring about knowing that Randy's has been consistently delivering great donuts since 1952. Hooray! Through this Cold War, the Civil Rights Movement, the counterculture, just making everyone feel good with donuts.
That's right. And they figured out how to evolve without losing what made them special in the
That's
first
right.
place. That original Inglewood location with the giant donut sign is still there. You can take your pictures and your selfies on Instagram holding the donut or the coffee you love. And now you get Randy's in Vegas, Phoenix, and even South Korea and Japan as well.
That's right. Just look for the giant donut. It's like they took the Ford approach: innovate and expand while keeping the core product excellent, although the Model T lasted way too long. When everything else is changing rapidly, sometimes you need a donut from a place that's been featured in more movies than most actors. Check them out at randysdonuts.com. Now, back to more historical chaos, eh?
Yeah, let's go to 1999, where Sarah Jane Olsen, former Symbionese Liberation Army member, gets arrested after 23 years on the run. And this is one of those stories where the 1970s finally caught up with the 1990s.
Yeah, I think the first words out of her mouth were, "Did Tanya turn me in that you know what?" The SLA was the group that kidnapped Patty Hearst. Huh? Tanya. So this arrest was like opening a time capsule of 70s radical politics that nobody really wanted to remember. Oh no, we're back to that.
Exactly. Olsen had been living as a suburban mom in Minnesota. Oh, yeah. Oh,
Yeah. Oh,
up
hey
there in
there.
Minnesota.
Oh,
Come on over, yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
For 2 decades, and I can speak that way because I have relatives in Minnesota, okay?
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead, Lane.
Don't give me any hard times.
No, no,
Uh,
no.
yeah, be nice, be
That's
nice.
oh yeah, Packers. Go, you
Yeah, he
cheesehead.
was going
Mhm.
to PTA meetings and soccer practice and the whole thing, and then the FBI shows up and is like, "Actually, you're still wanted for domestic terrorism."
Yeah. Yeah, so they walked into her kitchen and said, "Oh, I see you're making bombs." Huh. Do people at the PTA meeting know that? Huh? It's the most bizarre example of reinvention I can think of. From urban gorilla to suburban parrot. Although, I guess if you're going to disappear, becoming aggressively normal is probably the way to do it. I mean, it's worked for me. I mean, don't say that. Okay.
And now we'll move on to more recent times,
Yeah.
2015, when a gentleman named Don Trump, is that his
Oh,
name?
tacos for everyone today. Sorry.
Launched his 2016 presidential campaign via escalator, which is somehow the perfect metaphor for everything that followed.
Yes, that escalator was going down. And at the time, most people thought this was a publicity stunt. Like, oh, Donald's running for president again. He does this every few years for attention. That's all this is.
And then it turned out he was actually serious and
Yeah.
also good at it, and
Yeah.
also completely changed how political campaigns work. Sometimes the joke candidate wins, and then you have to deal with the fact that it wasn't actually a joke.
Yeah. And although launching a presidential campaign via escalator while simultaneously insulting entire ethnic groups is such a perfect encapsulation of a 2015 political energy, grandiose and inflammatory at the same time, sometimes works.
Hey, it's a twofer, right? Fit it
Yeah,
all in there.
that's right. Who
And
knew?
then the next year, 2016, Shanghai Disneyland opens.
All right.
Talk about entertainment and distraction. Disney's
Mm-hmm.
first park in mainland China, which represents probably the most expensive cultural translation project in human history.
That's true. Think about what this means. A California entertainment company spending, get this, $5.5 billion billion to bring American fantasy and mouse ear storytelling to a country with 5,000 years of its own stories. Do you think it worked?
Well, I don't know. We'll have to go and try it out for ourselves, Dave. What do you think?
Well, uh, it
Although Disney
says.
was smart about it, they included Chinese cultural elements and made it feel less like American culture exported and more like Disney stories told in a Chinese context.
That's right. That's why it worked. It's fascinating that this opened just 1 year after Trump announced his campaign while talking about China as an economic threat. Meanwhile, Disney was literally building the most expensive theme park ever constructed there. And they ate it up.
Yeah, sometimes business moves faster than politics. Disney was like, we don't care about trade wars. We care about selling Mickey Mouse ears to 1.4 billion people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's June 16th, everybody. Divided houses that actually divided, space pioneers, cultural revolutions, and the collision between radical politics and suburban normalcy.
That's right, and rodents in China. Huh. If there's a theme here, it's that bold predictions often come true. And rodents in China happen when people decide they're not accepting the status quo anymore. Whether that's Lincoln calling out slavery, Nureyev choosing freedom and trying to say he wants to go to the bathroom in Russian to a bunch of Parisian cops, or students in Soweto demanding education. But let's not forget rodents in China.
I have a feeling that sound drop is coming back over and over down the road, Dave.
Well, it's Mickey Mouse at New Disneyland in Shanghai, ladies and gentlemen. If you didn't get the reference, never mind.
Rodents in China.
Rodents in China.
Thanks again to Randy's Donuts.
Randy's!
They don't have any
Woohoo!
rodents. No,
No.
sir. Thanks to them for sponsoring today's episode. When the world is dividing itself and ballet dancers are defecting and presidential campaigns are launching via escalator, at least we have that giant donut sign as a constant.
Damn right, ladies and gentlemen. That's what we need. Giant donut signs as a constant. So visit randydonuts.com and remember, history is full of people who looked at impossible situations and decided to do something about it. Sometimes it works out great, sometimes it takes decades, but things do change.
That's right. And I'm Lane.
And I'm very deep today. I don't know why. And I'm Dave.
And we'll see you next time on Touring History,
where we prove that the past was just as weird as the present, but with fewer smartphones to document it. Fortunately.
Yes.
Yes.
Good stuff. All
All
right. See you tomorrow,
right.
everybody.
Thanks, Randy.